Good morning, and thank you very much for Vincent for the introduction. So, I'd like to start with a talk about blockchain and specifically what we see as the impact on what we call the programmable economy. And I want to start with a story that was about 15 or 20 or even more ago. In 1993, a friend of mine that worked at the University of Groningen called me and said, now you have to look. And he showed me this web page of the CERN in Switzerland on a Mosaic browser on his computer and say, well, this is the first web pages we have here. And I said, oh, that's interesting. We'll see web pages. We're going to be able to have websites. And this is really growing, so we should be very enthusiastic. And he said, well, we are enthusiastic, and this will really change. But it took a while before everybody was there. But there were a lot of enthusiastic people that said, this is great work. But it still took a couple of years to do that. And 7 years later, I went to the US, and we were there in the year 2000. And we started to actually bid on groceries on Priceline.com, where you could bid for a price and then you go to your local supermarket and pay a different price than the other guy in the line behind you for the same shopping experience. That was a change we didn't anticipate in 1993. And then the 10 years after, there was all the social media came. We had Facebook growing from nothing, not even existing, in 2003, 2004, to 500 million users in 2010. So the key thing is that activities, you would expect they would go very fast in the beginning. If you predict now what will happen with blockchain, you think, well, in 1 or 2 years, everything will change. If we look at what Vincent said 2-3 years ago when we had the first blockchain conference here, is he would say, well, in 2 years, everybody will use blockchain for everything. That didn't happen. And now we are in this blockchain for pain, growing pain conference. But the interesting thing is that in 10 years, all those new things will come and all those changes, and we have no idea how to anticipate. So although there is the growth in the beginning not going that quickly, and laws more also kind of is kind of those exponential growth that we see all the time with all those applications and things that happen, is that it's as a person very hard to think about exponential growth. But in 10 years, we'll see all kind of new developments that we cannot even imagine. The social media of blockchain eventually, or whatever else as new things that will happen. So what I want to talk about here is, sorry, I have the wrong button here. What I want to talk here is what's the current state of blockchain and what's the programmable economy and how does it relate to blockchain? And is it ready for prime time? So first, the definition of blockchain. We've all seen it, and I can be very short on this. This is our definition, but the key thing I want to emphasize here today is the last 3 words of this sentence. A blockchain, all the stuff about kind of immutable, recorded, let's say, a ledger, etc. But including a programmable behavior is something which is very, very unique. And that is something that when you think of it, code that can be distributed and that can be agreed upon by the entire blockchain to run depending on what you do. And that's very much in line with what I'm going to talk about, the programmable economy that we will see. But before that, let's talk about what our clients see. So each year we ask our client, what do you see as a key technology that's going to change your business? So we ask the question this year, in your opinion, which 3 of these technologies have the most potential to change your organization of next years? And obviously the things like advanced analytics and Internet of Things are at the top of the list. But at number 8, we'll have blockchain. So that means that about 10% of users, of 10% of organizations really think that blockchain will be a game changers. Well, what are they doing? Well, half of the companies don't really give very much of a thought to it. No interest at all. Another third of the companies would say, it's somewhere on my radar, but I'm not really going to look at that for now. But there's about 10% that are planning for it, and there's a 1% that really have invested in the blockchain technologies. And if we then look at who they are, typically they're the financial services guys, or it is the media or government, or it's in energy and utilities. And it's interesting because that's an area where trust is very key. So they are interested because they may see an erosion of their business model, or actually maybe an opportunity for the business model. So that's where the investment at this point are. And we expect that by 2025, we will see a total business of about 176 billion in blockchain, which is related to what we call business value add. So additional new revenue, reduction of direct cost, or actually reduction of indirect cost, like better quality or better services to your customers. And by 2030, that could be $3 trillion to go to. So that's where we are now. But what does it mean to what we call the programmable economy? Well, you would first say, what is the programmable economy? Well, we have a definition for that as well, as we have for many things. And we call that a natively smart economic system that enables the production and consumption of goods and services. Well, you would say that's true for any economic system. But the key thing here are the first three words: the natively smart economic system. So the natively code that is actually embedded in code, and you could use a blockchain for that code to run certain transactions and to do things automatically. We all know, or you probably have heard of last year when we were in the same place, we had the distributed the DAO organization that had just started then, and then they had the code to automatically let's say, give funds if a lot of people would agree to give that as a trusted fund to somewhere else. And there was a bug in the code, and due to that bug, suddenly 50 million euros was streaming away there. So that means that the DAO organization had kind of a bug in their code, which is interesting, but it also is an element of that. So the key thing that I have here is that if you look at the various phases of where we go from now to in the future, is that on the left-hand side, you see digital marketing. That's something a lot of companies look at. So we look at optimizing your transaction. You look at technologies like what we call the nexus. It's the mobile, the cloud, and big data. They all had so much usage. Everybody was already on mobile platforms. Everybody was using the cloud technologies that allowed them to really optimize on using technology to optimize your marketing, to really think about not just spending dollars, but also see how efficient that was. We then moved a couple of years ago to what we call digital business. And digital business is all about new business models. The music industry, the Netflix, all the capabilities with Uber. And you see there a key change is that you would use hardware, you would use tools, you would use kind of things as part of the whole equations. And we had a piece of work about 5 or 8 years ago. I was working with a car manufacturing in Europe that said, I have these cars, I'm very good in engineering those cars, but I want to make sure that I'm now able to understand who actually drives the car, because once they leave the factory, I have no idea. And companies like Ford started to have insurance, simply because they could have a better insight how you're driving your car, because they had all the sensors in there, and they could feed that information back to the factory to really understand how people drive their cars. So that's the phase of digital business that we're still in the middle of, but that's happening. And the key change there is things that do things. Afterwards, we get to what we call the adaptive phase, where the things actually do things for your refrigerator that can order food for you. And then we get to the autonomous phase, and Vincent can talk for you for the entire day how his Tesla automatically drives from one place to another place and does things and decides on their own using self-optimizing algorithms to do that. And after that, we get to yet another phase of what things can do, and that the things really act on themselves, that they have programmable capabilities to do things almost without people interacting with them. They will work on that area. So this whole programmable capability is something you want to make sure you think about. What will that lead to us? Do we want this? Because if we look at an environment where where you have a smart contract that do all those things, is actually, do we want this whole area happening? And over the next 10 years, we really have to think about the programmable capability, how much we want for that. Because if you have a piece of code that does things, that has a legally binding obligation to do that, I can't walk to somebody else and say, can't walk to a judge saying, well, this needs to be changed. If the other guy that has the private key doesn't want to have this change implemented, there's no way he can do that. So we have a lot to learn in that area. So is blockchain ready for prime time? Well, some pieces are. We have all kind of use cases. The case of last year here, we heard about that. Is it still there? Actually, I haven't heard of that for quite a little while. There's the cases around the insurance for diamond registration, where you could actually argue, do you really need a blockchain for that? But that's a separate discussion. There's a case where the UN worked blockchain for providing cryptocurrency vouchers to refugees. That's an example. So there's all kind of examples that we see. And we typically map that on what we call the hype cycle. Vincent already introduced that originally, where we see a technology trigger in the beginning. And every year we map about 2,500 technologies on that hype cycle. And one subset is the one about the programmable economy and blockchain. So if you look at all those technologies that could be up there, and they're small prints and you can't read them in the back, but that doesn't matter. The key thing is there are a couple of those technologies that are considered to be more mature. And these are specifically in the area of cryptocurrency, where on the other hand, everything else to contract, etc., is still on the left-hand side. We are still in that growing pain, and those are things we still have to consider. So if you look at, and this is my final slide, Vincent, I know you're coming this way already, is if we look at what are key mistakes that we see in blockchain projects. These are things related, and we have 10 of them. We're only going to list 5 of them. The number one that we see all the time is misunderstanding or ignoring the purpose of a blockchain technology. We see too often that people basically say, we're using a blockchain, piece of blockchain where you could simply use a database, where a database would actually be a better solution. We see all kind of, let's say, confusion about the foundation level protocol with a complete business solution. The key thing here is the blockchain just gives you the database capability. It doesn't have the entire process, the entire function. You still have to build the user interface. You still have to build the process around that. And the other one that is a key thing is that assuming the current platforms are the ones that are dominant tomorrow. My introduction slide talked about Priceline. Priceline is almost no more, went bankrupt. We talked about the Mosaic browser. That browser doesn't exist anymore. Don't expect the stuff that's here today to be the platform of the future. But you also can't expect that the smart contract is something that is a solved problem. And finally, the failure to learn and to incorporate learning in a process as part of that. So I want to leave it at that way. Thank you very much, Vincent, and you probably have some questions for me.
Yeah, well, they have some questions. How can you, with dry eyes, say that we are beyond the hype cycle with cryptocurrency? Have you seen, 30 times in 90 days? Don't you think that's completely hype craziness? You think we're already beyond? That slide is old dated. Gartner is behind. Right? I mean, we went from $8 to $300. Is that before hype, or are we already past the hype?
That's hype about the currency itself. It's not about the technology that underpins.
You're one layer deeper. Okay, yeah. Let's see what. Yeah, because was that an investment advice? Don't invest in blockchain and don't invest in Ether and that kind of stuff.
No,
because they're going away.
No. We talk about technology. We talk about technology,
yeah.
Not about the Ethers and the blockchain themselves.
Hey, 10% of the companies are thinking about blockchain and trying to do something in the IT. Do you measure it from top management or for IT management?
If you look at our clients, they're typically the CIOs, but there's more and more of those CIOs that are part of boardroom conversations.
Yeah. So 10%, is that a lot or is that a little? I mean, is that just, are there 10% technologies, or is it just one of them, or is it already getting there?
We have a list of about 30 technologies or 40 technologies that we asked them to pick from. I don't know the exact number of list, but ending up having them ask which are the 3 top ones that are changing your business and expect you to change, and then end up at number 8. I think that's an interesting thing.
Okay, good. Okay. can we do IoT without blockchain? I mean, we have 50 billion devices coming to the market, right? Is it possible? Can we design secure IT systems like the blockchain? Are there a lot of alternatives? I mean, is the blockchain much more secure than other IT things?
That's a very interesting question.
Thank you.
And that's a very interesting question. I guess you could argue to have both ways. I'm not an expert in IT to really know and to understand whether or not you can do that without IoT. I'd leave that up to somebody that's really an expert on IoT.
Okay, we have many more speakers coming up to that thing. But I mean, designing, you know that security is a major pain in the butt, right? I mean, we built software and then we build a whole lot of things, security around it after the fact to keep it secure, and we're failing bitterly. You know, every bank, every big organization, the IT normally is a layer of old stuff and is not secure. Can the blockchain help to rethink the IT architecture?
Well, there's also always all kinds of level on security. There's security level related to the fact that you can get to data and understand and decrypt data, and the blockchain does a very good job in kind of hashing stuff and understanding where there is. However, everything related to roles and who can do what, you still have to decide who does that and how you can program that into your application.
But you can program it into the thing itself. Into the role can be into the money or into the coin or into. But can be on a different level.
But potentially those will have bugs as well. And everything related to security is a part of technology. It's a part of process. It's a part of kind of who kind of sets those security roles at a certain point in time.
Okay. Okay, Bart made it very clear, blockchain doesn't solve all our problems, but it's definitely on the mind of the CIO and beyond. Thank you very much, Bart Mellink.